Okay, just so this recording is complete and has the motion mentioned at the outset, we are debating on the motion this House would ban all political donations. All four benches are in the House. We'll now begin with the Prime Minister's speech. Here.
All right. I'll begin in three, two, one. Good evening to this august gathering. Now, I'll begin my debate by defining the key terms in the motion. Firstly, what does side proposition mean when they talk about political donations over here? Political donations in our world look like crowdfunding and the donations that are made by multi-billion-dollar conglomerates either before the elections or during the term of the government to influence the decisions that are made by them. This in today's world looks like Bernie Sanders crowdfunding, which was able to raise approximately $6 million in the United States, or crowdfunding by defense contractors and NRA to influence the USA's military and gun laws. Right. What does side proposition propose in order to implement this policy? We believe that our model consists of 2 points. Firstly, we believe that all forms of donations that are, these multi-billion dollar donations by these conglomerates and by crowdfunding should be banned immediately. Next, we believe that an equal amount will be given from the nation's budget to each party to actually fulfill the endeavors of, campaigning and going to rallies and, actually spreading the message to the public, because we as side believe that campaigning is as crucial to democracy as voting procedures are. Thus, we believe that this amount would be given to each party and equal amount will be given to them. What would be the impacts of our model? We'll see that unlike today's scenario, where we have seen a side where we have seen a status quo where donations are not considered morally apprehensive. Today we see that donations are something as normal as possible, which actually encourages these parties and people to take these donations under the table as well. We believe that in our side, these cases won't happen, because since the government themselves are banning the donations, since we are banning these political donations, that sends a message to the people about the morally inapprehensive nature of these donations in the very first place, which will be explained throughout our three constructors as well. Next, we believe that the major stakeholders in this argument, this debate will be the politicians, the society, and finally the corporations themselves. What's the first constructive that side proposition talks about? That is how it will reduce the corporates' influence, how it will reduce the corporates' lobbying influence in the legislative bodies of the nations. Right? We believe that in democracies there are three pillars of the government which function best when they're separated from each other. In today's scenario, however, we see that the economic or the corporates usually influence the decisions that are made by both executive and the legislature. They do this by, either spending huge funds on lobbying, or, actually by putting or, funding party that, actually supports their ideas and, fills money in their pockets. They do not care about what's best for the nation. They care about what's good for them. We have seen capitalistic scenarios in most of these countries. We have seen capitalistic greed in most of these conglomerates, and therefore we have no reason why to believe that this greed slowly influences the decisions that are made by the politicians. What are a few examples of these? What are the main problems that corporates bring up? Firstly, it's the increase in prices of multiple goods. We have seen the major insulin problem that occurs in America. We have seen the insulin companies influencing and lobbying to, actually prohibit or, stop government from introducing any laws against these insulin prices. We have seen defense contractors making deals with the US government to initiate wars that actually benefits them. We have seen NRA actually influencing the government to not introduce the anti-gun laws. And all these problems have led to massive impact on the entire world. We have seen deaths of people all around the world, lack of medical care that were, faced by multiple people. The insulin problem in America is one of the biggest problems that have been initiated by these political donations in the first place. Right? Now, how are we the side that's actually stopping it? Firstly, we as side proposition are mutually exclusive in stopping this. It's because of the fact that we provide a stop to all these political donations. We provide equal footing to each company. We say that it's the government that gives you the money required for campaigning, not the conglomerates, not the businessmen, whom you actually serve. right? We do not want politicians to serve these businessmen who they believe have put them in power. Because today the narrative of politicians have switched from actually serving the people, from helping the society, to saving or fulfilling the needs of the businessmen that place them in power in the very first place. Because that's what political donations do. It actually helps the society. It actually shifts the view of politicians from the needy, from the vulnerable, to serving the rich. That's not what democracy stands for. That's not what side proposition stands for. Thank you.
Thanking Prime Minister for their fine speech, inviting Leader of Opposition. Here.
Most pleasant evening to the House at large. Today, the motion provided is that this house believes that the donations to the government should be banned. I'd like to start with our model. We feel that people donating should be restricted and not banned, with people having qualifications such as, for example, the Chinese social crediting system, a cruel, inhumane, yet efficient and clever system in which people are given a score of trustworthiness. While this may seem to make me look heartless, I'm pretty sure there's a reason why they are ruling the world. Furthermore, this money and its expenses would be monitored, as would the expense by a special department in the court. So let's define this motion. This motion means that we should ban the donation of money in the form of loans or gifts to the government, and we are proud to oppose. Now, I'll be stating two main arguments in my case, starting with the first one. The benefits of people donating, especially licensed people, more than outtrump the benefits. Now, I need you to picture this situation. You walk into your crumbling shack, you're a poor mother with a sick child. Your child is coughing way too violently to be normal and then coughing up blood. Now you run to the government hospital. You can't afford anything else, but the line never ends. Now reimagine the situation to if the government had the proper amount of money under supervision. Your child would have survived. Your child would live. Let's take up a second example. You ride along a bridge and suddenly the road is uneven, your car swerves off, and before you know it, you're permanently disfigured for the rest of your life. If you put a tiny effort in putting up supervision and licensing, then imagine how many lives we could save, how many innocent men, women, and children, the civilians who the government who had chosen the government as their protectors, their lives would be there. Our world is full of people who are confident and powerful and know what they want: a happy, healthy India for all. Now let me move on to my second argument. My second speaker will be seconding this argument and supporting me on this one. When you ban something, you're not getting rid of it. You're just provoking people into doing it more and more. You're provoking these so-called businessmen into cheating and lying more and more, making sure that this never ends. The likelihood that you're going to catch everyone before there are consequences is literally 0.01%. You can't stop people from doing something just by banning it. For example, when we're children, we're rebellious. We never ever think about what our parents say no to. We never ever think about how we might be helped, how this might help us. We just think about we have to go against this just because our parents said so. In many ways, adults are similar to these teenagers. Proud to oppose. Thank you.
All right, thanking Leader of Opposition for their fine speech. Before I invite the DPM though, I'm going to make POIs compulsory only for this particular debate because I need to see how you're going to respond to POIs in the tournament. So please take one POI because it's compulsory now. Hello, do you want to answer a POI because you have a lot of time left? Okay, let's start from the DPM onwards, okay? Inviting DPM for their speech whenever you're ready. Here.
Yeah, am I audible and visible?
Yes, both, yeah.
Now as well, right? I just switched mics, I hope.
Yeah. Yes.
I'd like you to put the POIs in chat. Also, can you just tell me the protected time? Sorry, I forgot what
the first minute and the last minute is your protected time.
Okay, got it. Okay, starting in 3, 2, 1, go. Panel, we saw analogies of supervision being the most important part of saving people from disaster. However, panel, we didn't actually see how that is relevant in this debate at all, right? We do not see how paying government, paying cash and donating to political parties for funding election campaigns and stuff, how that equals donation, we simply do not know. And that is something that was very, very odd by opposition, since they just gave us an analogy and somehow expected all of us to understand how that equated in this debate. We tell you, panel, that it does not, all right? It makes absolutely no sense, and we will not stand for that in this debate at all, right? Let's address some of the problems that opposition talked about in our model, right? Here's the thing. They tell us that once we encourage people, once we ban all donations, we incentivize people to make under the table donations, that we incentivize people to act out in an act of rebellion and not follow what the government is saying because the government is cruel and the government wants to curb our powers. That's what opposition characterizes a model as. We tell you, panel, that is not simply possible, right? Let's look at what actually happens on our side, right? When donations are capped, when crowd-funded as well as donations by conglomerates are capped, what happens is that funds are provided by the government through different through the budget in a way where all of the funds are distributed equally, right? This means, panel, that if there are 10 political parties contesting an election, all of these 10 political parties have the same amount of money. Now, if a political party takes out significantly more media campaigns, takes out significantly more grand rallies, and takes out some, more, basically is doing a lot more in advertising for political campaigns, we tell you, panel, that is going to be caught, right? If one political party is doing 1 hour of ad time, if others are doing 10 hours, we tell you that is not going to be happening on our side because they're simply going to get caught. This is basic, since these inherently have an effect on the public, we tell you that they will have an effect. They will be very well visible to all authorities, and they will actually be caught and not happen on our side. Moving on to our second argument then on why we are the more inclusive side of the house. Here's the thing, panel. This is what status quo looks like, right? In the status quo, parties that cater to significant population groups, they have simply more they are simply more popular because they have more reach, right? Since the parties that want that for example, the BJP in India, the BJP has connections with a lot of very, very big organizations, both in terms of finance and in terms of social influence. That means that the BJP inherently has an advantage over other political parties in this country in terms of media campaigns. That means that if a small political party from, let's say from a small village which has campaign manifestos and which has characteristics of a great political party, a party which would make a great government, that party is simply not going to get enough, simply won't have enough financial firepower to fund their campaign. That happens in the status quo. However, panel, on our side, through our model, we tell you that we are inherently more inclusive, right? These parties that are at the bottom, that may not have had the financial firepower to support themselves in media campaigns and come to the forefront, we tell you that on our side, these parties do have that firepower, that these parties will have the same amount of money that these major, major significant political parties have. But that means that inherently we will have better governments on our side of the house, because then there would be more visionaries, there would be more people who would be willing to get into the political system, who would be willing to work for the people, and who would actually have the same amount of prospects of getting themselves seen as some of the major legacy political parties. Before moving on, I'd like to take the POI.
Right. So the speaker talked about how there are bigger political parties and smaller political parties, but then it also talked about how, all of these political parties will be given almost the same amount of money by the government. So is this equitable distribution of money according to the speaker?
Well, yeah, great question. So here's the thing, panel. We think that the residue of influence from these political parties, it will remain. All right. We are not saying that immediately overnight, as our model is implemented, we'll have an absolutely equal playing field. We're not claiming that. However, panel, in the long run, the residue of the influence of these political parties is absolutely bound to decline, right? Let's say in the next 3 election cycles, we tell you that, okay, probably in the next 2 election cycles, the BJP, due to its sheer size, it might not be as equal to a party from the village. However, panel, in the long run, in the next 3 or 4 election cycles, we think that the influence and the influence of the BJP would simply not stay just because of the fact that the financial firepower is not there anymore. Just because of the fact that all parties are equal and they are having equal amount of screen time, equal amount of rallies, equal amount of overall influence and getting in front of the people, right? Therefore, we tell you that in the long run, even if in the short run we consider the fact that we will not be very inclusive, then in the long run we will be, and that is why we take the debate, because we prioritize people, we prioritize democracy, and we prioritize political parties and equality for them. That is why I'm extremely proud to propose today's debate. Thank you.
Thanking DPM for their fine speech, inviting DLO. Yo.
Okay. So I'm going to start in 3, 2, 1. This House would ban all political donations. Now, firstly, I, as the Deputy Leader of Opposition, have been tempted to rebut the opening government. So, to the Prime Minister, yes, it does send them a message about the inadequacy of this action. However, how can you guarantee that in a country of over 1 billion people, not even 1,000 will continue to make such donations behind the back of the government or behind the back of people? Now, you also think that this is a solution to putting all companies on equal footing? Perhaps, dear Prime Minister, but I believe that there are much more efficient ways of doing the same. Moving on to the deputy leader, deputy prime minister, you stated that the 10 political parties all have the same amount. Well, no, that is factually incorrect on your part. You along with your prime minister kept repeating that people who continue to make these donations when it is banned will be caught. But what is your guarantee that they will be caught? How can you assure this will happen without the country having to face consequences before these people are caught? Now, when you ban something, you don't get rid of it. You force it underground and give yourself a resource if you can't catch it. If you catch it happening, the likelihood that you're going to catch everything before there are consequences is almost non-existent. So it's my opinion that that banning them will do little to nothing for the state of corruptions. It's also my opinion that transparency is much more important than just stopping the flow. I believe that the solution around this is not to be hasty or drastic, but to restrict it instead. Secondly, let's talk about the benefits of political donations. Now, let's look at this logically. Here, donating to the government. The government is a democracy in India. However, now the government is a democracy in India. So now over here, if the government doesn't use these donations wisely for the benefit of the people, then as the people of a democratic country, we have the right to object. If the government wants to hold a stance in the next round of elections or even in the current round, then they must oblige to the will of the people, to the objection of the people, and they must use it for the benefit of the people. Thus, yes. Before I begin, I would like to take Tanish's POI.
When the parties that are contesting elections also have to go to the same corporations that fund the government in the first place, why would the parties be incentivized to reverse the newly elected parties be incentivized to reverse the decisions that weren't in the people's favor in the first place?
That would be the case because ultimately in a government it is our will whether we want the government to make a certain decision or not. Let's take a case. For example, looking back at the farmers' little incident, when the government issued a law, the farmers objected to it, and ultimately, after days and days of protest, the government had to oblige to the farmers' objection. They had to listen to it. They had to change and amend the law according to the farmers' opinion and will. That now because we're in a democratic country and because even if it's a newly elected party, the government, exactly because it's a newly elected party, the government would still want to hold its stance, whether it's new or whether it's old. Now, if we keep this legal but restricted, then through these donations, the government can actually use these donations, this crores of money, lakhs of money, for the benefit of us people, for the benefit of our status. And here I conclude my case. Thank you.
Okay, I thank the DLO for their speech. With this, we end the opening half of the debate, inviting member of government to open case from side CG. Here.
Right. I'll be just taking 30 seconds to gather my thoughts.
Sure works.
Right. I'll be starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. Good evening, everyone. As the first speaker of closing government, I will first like to offer some rebuttals to what the opening opposition has said. I'm so sorry, but I think the timer has not been started. Yeah. So first, I'll be offering some rebuttals to the opening opposition. Firstly, I will offer rebuttals to their model at large. Now, what the first speaker of opening opposition came here and talked about was how they'll be using a score of trustworthiness, and that they will rather be restricting political donations and all the money will be monitored. Now, what we need to understand is that even in status quo, the amount of money that a political party can use for political campaigns, political fundraisers is supposed to be monitored. But guess what? If we actually talk about reality, if we talk about the ground root level, many parties go beyond their budget, go beyond what they're supposed to use, and they use more money. So, what exactly we're talking about here is that this will only work theoretically. The model that the opening opposition promotes will only work theoretically because they haven't, first of all, mentioned who the money will be monitored by. And secondly, when they say that they'll all, and secondly, when they say that all of these political donations will be restricted, they don't exactly talk about who is going to be implementing this entire model that they have, right? Then, of course, a huge point that came up in both of the speakers in the opening opposition speeches was that if we ban political funding, what exactly will happen is that these political parties will not be able to use money in benefit of the people. Right. But what we need to understand is that even in status quo, though we are giving them political funding and though we are giving them political donations, political parties may not have an inherent goodwill amongst them to help the poor or to help the needy. Most of them might just go into the pockets of the political parties' members, right? So we need to take corruption into hand as well and not take a utopian world completely. Right. And then the second speaker of the opening opposition came here and talked about how there are many different ways that of making political parties come on equal footing during elections, but proceeded to not tell us what any of these efficient methods were. Right. Now I'll be moving on to my main arguments. Right. So let's talk about status quo. In status quo, with the use of political donations, many people bribe the government. Now, what does this exactly look like? So, if this political party forms the government in the preceding election, then what happens is, since they have made such huge political donations, these people, they don't get caught for any misdemeanors, and they use this bribe that they had for personal gain, right? So mainly what this constitutes is inequality, because they're not caught for the misdemeanors, they're not caught for the misdeeds, and in the end, it's not a democratic society at all, right? Now, what do we propose in our side of the house, right, as closing government? What we propose instead is that the election commission gives money from people's taxes to political parties. Now, how exactly will this work? We think that national parties should get a bigger sum of money, right? Because they need to talk about huger media campaigns in state parties. Meanwhile, we think that independent candidates in state parties, they should also get at least some amount of money, but less than the national parties. Now, what exactly will this look like? This will look like the EC taking money, it being a completely transparent process, and the EC kind of talking about how the money will be used in different political parties. So this means that the political parties can't use money wherever they want to. Instead, what the EC will do is it will tell them how much amount of money needs to be used for what purpose and what exactly. So there's a greater sense of transparency, and it also satisfies the biggest stakeholders yet, the people or the donators, because now these people know how exactly the money is being used, right? And this might further incentivize people to donate, because in status quo, people think that due to corruption, political donations won't work either way in developing the society or making the society better. But if it's a completely transparent process like it is on our side of the house, then they know how the money is being used. Now, how will this not work on the opening government's case? Mainly because here they are saying that the government will give money to political parties. Now, if the government gives money, then the ruling party will obviously give more money to to their own party so that they can win the next election, right? So this will result in even more corruption, right? With that, I would like to end my case. Thank you very much.
Thanking MG, member of government. As much as we liked your speech, please do take POIs positively since they have been mandated here. So, inviting member of opposition now. Here.
Please give me 30 seconds, ma'am.
Yeah, sure.
Yes, ma'am. My pronouns are she, her, and I prefer to take verbal POIs. So, panel, what does the status quo look like? In the status quo, not only do they exist corrupt political parties, but also a large number of political parties are those which exist in the rural areas, which are largely motivated to do something good to the people. However, the amount that they receive from the government is not sufficient for them to expand their outreach amongst people so that they can get their votes. Regardless of how good the party is, if people don't know you and your objectives, that idea isn't clearly going to work. And this is where political donations play a huge role. Now, OG defines political donations as crowdfunding and billions of dollars that you get from huge companies and MNCs. However, that's not the only case. Even individuals can donate their money to political parties. Even charities can give their money. It could be in the form of contracts that you also lend. So we clearly don't agree with that definition. Moving on, then they talk about how I'll take that later on, about how the budget about how money from the nation's budget would be allocated to political parties. Panel, we already observed that in our status quo, a certain amount is dedicated to political parties for their outreach and campaigning. So we clearly don't see that how their model is going to solve it in the first place. And again, they talk about how these companies that make these charities play to influence these companies. Now, again, regardless, say for example, if Tata is giving some money to a political party to improve the industrialization, regardless, the end outcome is that some citizen who is working as an employee or who or who would be benefited indirectly has this advantage. So regardless of that, we do see that the lowest number of people do get benefited from here. And again, when money is coming from these huge organizations, now political parties become accountable to these people. It's not that they're influencing, it's just that now these companies need to know about how their money is being utilized. Next, LO talks about how this money needs to be restricted, not banned, and it needs to be monitored. However, they don't talk about how this money is going to be monitored. And then they talk about how provoking it is just going to increase more of it. However, we would like to extend our case, and adding to this is that now at present, we do know that from where the money is coming in for political parties. However, once we ban it, we still know that the large parties would still get their donations, but then it would get their donations illegally. But now it just gets worse, because now we don't know from where they're getting this money. And this is the time where companies could influence political parties in the wrong way. Again, DPM talks about how about how parties in villages don't have access to access to enough funding as large about how large parties have. However, we do believe that because they don't get sufficient money from the government, this is where the donation that they get from private companies come into the case. And when we ban this, these parties in the villages don't get this funding at all, and therefore they're not able to take their party's ideology further. And I'll take a POI now.
how do you expect smaller political parties with very less influence to raise the same amount of capital as large parties with greater influence through crowdfunding and individual?
Yes, I get that. So we're not saying that they'll be able to raise the same amount of money. What we're saying is that the amount of money that they're at least able to get at present is useful to them. However, on the propositions one, will you ban it, they won't be able to get that amount of money as well. Then panel, what we largely want to talk about is that in this debate, even if you ban political parties getting these donations, the parties at large, such as the BJP or the Congress, they would still get their funding because of their goodwill that they've generated and the network that they have. They would still get it from illegal sources. However, once we ban it, the true impact would be on the parties at the rural level, in the local parties. These are the parties that would be affected at large, and we're not ready to take the trade-off because in their case, best case, even when completely all of these funding is stopped, the large parties would still continue to get their funding, and that does not stop the problem of corruption. However, in their case, it is when the corruption further increases because we don't know the sources of these corruption. And with that, we're very proud to oppose.
All right, thanking member of opposition, inviting government whip here.
Okay, yeah. So you can start the timer. So something that I've noticed is that the opposition has shown no trust in our legislation. They kept on saying that we cannot figure out who is funding them if we put it illegal, but we can we please trust our source of legislation on how we catch people? Something when it is illegal, at least people would be put behind the bars. They will have consequences of their work, rather than when we are paid for something. I'm giving you an example as of now. Consider me as a big political party. Let's just say Congress, for an example. And I'm being paid by a multinational company or an organization in India. And they have given me some money and told me that all my crimes are put behind. And I'm supposed, you keep this money. All my work is not supposed to come in the light of media. And now this is your money. You use it for your funding and everything. And we should not be there. And it's completely legal to give political donations. Of course, we just discussed that. So now automatically the work of them doing illegal work is higher, and them doing it through illegal means is way higher. In fact, when something is illegal, it would be easier for them to, catch people, because you would know that, like the opening government said, that when something is illegal and if someone is having more campaignings and more rallies and someone is using more funds, that basically clearly shows that how, they have more money and they will be accountable for their work. Automatically, when we are banning the political donations, we also should see how, when we are keeping the money we are getting from the government or from, first of all, I do not, while we say that nations should give us a fixed budget, like the closing opposition said that a part of money is already assigned. The amount we are assigned is from, it should be from an independent, I will take that later. The part of the money should be assigned from an independent body rather than the government itself. And the independent body should monitor everybody on what they are doing with the money. It should be accounted properly. Oh, sorry for the word. It should be accounted properly and how you're supposed to do it. And when the opposition, the opening government, I'm so sorry. Yeah, not the opposing government. I'm so sorry. It's the opposing government. When they said that, the example of government hospital getting money, I have rarely seen the political donations, to be very specific, to be used as resources for money. I think that would be it. I will take POIs now.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask that you talked about how corruption will increase if we do not ban political donations. But in the status quo, is corruption not existent? Doesn't it exist still? And how it has been rising since the 2008 global stock market fall?
Okay, so obviously, I'm talking about a world where we are back. See, the corruption is still there, right? But right now, it's not accounted for because obviously we are saying that political donations are legal as of now. We are still discussing if they're supposed to make it illegal, right? So when we are paying for something to hide our work or to hide our bad deeds, then automatically it's a part of corruption. When we are putting something illegal and we are saying someone is paying for it, and like I said, it will be pretty noticeable when someone is spending more on something, that they will be going behind the bar. They will pay for their work. They will pay for their bad deeds. I think that answers your question.
Okay, thanking government whip for their fine speech, inviting opposition whip to conclude the debate. Yeah.
Yeah, am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay. So I'll start in 3, 2, 1, go. Across that four speeches, side government has had a conflicting characterization about how banning of all political donations produce in the betterment of society. Because where it was convenient for them, they told us that these conglomerates will ruin the effective usage of these funds. And where it wasn't, they told us that our implementation doesn't stand. But this tells us that they are willing to strike the vulnerable. I will give you more reasons as to why this motion doesn't stand and will elaborate on our side's case further. I would like to raise two questions: how we improve government stature, and secondly, how we give small departments or minority parties to bring a change and to channel it to right will. Let us start by looking at the weird characterization. They talked about multi-billion dollar giants are the main donators. The main donator is actually individuals and charities. We absolutely understand capitalistic thinking, how companies can actually make their power lead, but we prevent it. We don't actually promote donations just by companies. We will look after how these donations function and how they are biased. As our side speaker already talked about restriction and not banning, because it isn't an effective way and doesn't change anything which has been already happening in the status quo. Then they talked about how our implementation is only theoretical and our restriction doesn't stand. But that is the thing. Neither does your banning work. Neither do you solve the problem we see today. You are not willing to see a better future, but only want to be stuck with the old resolvent, which hasn't brought any real solutions. Our restrictions are indeed effective because we are sure that our association with other agencies would provide a see-through at where the problems have affected. Furthermore, they talked about how the minority parties have enough funds to bring their thoughts and how they can promote their campaigns effectively. But how do you think that is plausible at all? How do you think that these exact same communists who couldn't raise their voice during the hijab law, who couldn't raise their voice when rapes occurred in their areas, how do you prove that? This is something which is non-existent at all. But by providing them with the funds, they won't be suppressed by the so-called conglomerates they talked about. Now, I would like to rise with my first question: how we improve government state and how we provide a better layout. We have been seeing the problems we have existed. Governments don't have the perfect funds to actually build hospitals in rural areas and developing areas, and these funds play a very integral part in improving them. As we at the side, as governments, the fund they require to change. These funds would help in building hospitals, medical centers, etc., building a better world and a better place for life.
Point.
The reason it matters, yes, I will take that later. The reason it matters is due to its integral part. Government doesn't have the money which can actually improve their stature. And especially in developing countries, we help this. The parties that are supposed to consist of funds are going to have the funds they require. We solve problems, and we solve problems that have played a major part in the past. We have seen governments not being able to actually bring a change. The reason behind it is sure corruption or not enough fund. This is something we solve. We solve corruption. We are the actual people who prioritize democracy and change, not side government. Now, I would like to move on to my second question. How we
Point.
give small departments or minority? Yes, I'll take that.
When you're talking about parties having more money and to build hospitals, that's the government that you're talking about. However, the motion in question talks about political parties and donations in their regard. The government is already elected in power.
Yeah, as we have talked about the governments and the political parties, these political parties are the one in power and also the one who are supposed to come in future because they want to bring a change, and thus they would help in building these problems we have already faced in status quo. Now, I would like to continue. Why does it matter and the problems we solve? Suppose a Gram Panchayat is willing to build a road, but these minorities surely don't have enough funds to improve this. We improve the governments or the states and inadequacy of proving them with enough funds. We give them the power to bring change within them to fulfill the needs of these people. Now, surely the question arises, will that money too go to the right will? That too is something we are sure at our side of the house. We believe that we'll provide results and we'll provide voice to the people who want to bring the change, not outside government who talks about other people or how we are not actually willing to bring the change. On this side of the house, we believe in the power of the people and how minorities deserve a chance to raise their voice and how we are willing to bring an effective change. If they really cared about the people and how the functioning of these governments and minorities worked, they wouldn't have dropped the entirety of their argument for a one-line response. Banning of political donations is something we aren't willing to stand for at this side of the house. And I think that I've proven why this case doesn't stand. Very proud to oppose. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanking opposition whip for their fine speech. With this, we conclude the debate. Give me 2 minutes to just consolidate the material I have on my sheets and I'll give you the verdict. Meanwhile, I'd like everybody else, the spectators, to please put in their verdict and their rankings in the chat. Do it ASAP. We're already running.
What rankings do we have to do?
Whoever you thought won should be given the first position and second, third, according to whoever you think takes whichever rank. So just put it in the chat. I am expecting that everybody whoever was spectating was also adjudicating. So please give your rankings in the chat.
The speakers are not supposed to do that, right?
No, 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 no.
Okay.
I'm on mute, sorry. I have my rankings with me. Could you all please give your rankings? The spectators, quickly, we don't have a lot of time.
Do we send it in DM to you?
Yeah, DM public chat, it works either way. Doesn't really matter.